Oh, is it possible to be in a turkey coma 2 days later?
This is the infamous turkey.
What's going on, you guys? TBR here, back yet again with another King of Fighters All-Star video. And in today's video, you guys know what time it is. Yep, that's right, it's Saturday, so it's time for the Saturday chat and chill. But before we get into all of that and more, make sure if you guys are new here and you haven't already done so, that you smash that like button and subscribe if you enjoy daily King of Fighters All-Star content such as this. And let's go ahead and get into this week's installment of the Saturday chat and chill. And in this week's video, we are going to be talking about all things Guilty Gear Collab update, the good, the bad, and the ugly that came along with it, but this time around it was mostly good, and I know that that might be a surprise to a lot of people out there, and there's still people out there that are in denial and want to believe that this was a bad update. But believe it or not, you guys, this was probably the best collaboration update we have ever had in the King of Fighters All-Stars. And of course, there are a couple of outliers that we'll talk about that made it not as perfect as it could have been. And honestly, the things that weren't very good about this update weren't even related to the Guilty Gear collaboration itself. So yeah, guys, this collaboration, as just a collaboration, if you're kind of just sequestering that aspect of this update to itself, is probably going to be the most generous and best update we've had for a collaboration. So I'm very, very happy with what I'm seeing with this collaboration. I've been having a whole hell of a lot of fun with this, and I knew going into it I was going to be having a lot of fun with this update. The second I saw the different events that we were getting with this, I thought to myself, okay, this is going to be something that is going to be a whole hell of a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot to do, and it almost seems as if it's going to be stuff this time around that I'm not even going to mind doing. And lo and behold, you guys, that's exactly what it's become. This update in general, whether it be the tower or the bike and guild raid event, or whatever the case may be with some of these in-game events that they decided to add to this collaboration, yeah, they really knocked it out of the park this time around, and it almost feels like they took a lot of the constructive criticism from the community for this collaboration update, because they were a lot more generous with multis and in general just tickets for summoning. And when it comes to the different rewards, the rewards this time around were absolutely incredible, including the login bonus event, which typically login bonus events feel like a foregone conclusion and an afterthought from Netmarble. This time around, we're getting things like an SS generic memory and all sorts of goodies. So yeah, guys, I think that Netmarble might have finally listened to some of the constructive criticism and feedback that we've been giving them on some of the issues they've had with these collaborations, and they decided to really take it to heart this time and gave us a collaboration that is very inclusive. Genuinely, if you guys think about it, if you were a new player just getting into the game with this collaboration and you were to pick up even any of the 3 characters in this collab that are going to be on the stronger side, you could go in after you've maxed these characters out, probably be able to finish out most of all of the Immortals, and you'd be able to compete in both guild raid modes. So yeah, guys, I think that this is going to be one of those updates where if you sleep on it, you're going to regret it in the future. And I do think that if you have a bunch of rubies you're sitting on and there's not something in particular you're saving them for, then this is the collaboration that you should be summoning on, because the strength is there, the overall versatility is there, and I would argue that if you have issues with anything like Immortals or Guild Raid or even the Spider Robot, this is going to be the collaboration for you, because you could kind of get to a point where you could close all of those things out potentially, as long as you were able to get all of these characters up to a considerable awakening level. Yeah, they pretty much cover all the bases. You've got super long 3PG finishers for all these characters that are going to almost be meta breaking for some of this PvE content. And while yes, the characters that are going to be marked as SS characters this time around are by far going to be the standouts for this collaboration by comparison to the regular AS characters, the AS characters are still really, really solid. So in general, I do think that this is probably going to be one of those collaboration updates where you definitely want to make sure that you are trying to pull for this stuff, because it is definitely going to be worth it, I think, in the long run, especially if you are going to have a newer account. Now, of course, this collaboration didn't bring along with it anything that we haven't necessarily seen before. It feels like it's more so going to be kind of more of the same, with just maybe a little bit of power creep when it comes to the SS characters. But even the power creep on the SS characters isn't necessarily going to be this enormous jump from what we've seen over the course of the past couple of months. At the end of the day, I think that this was a really positive update in general. So I think that a lot of people out there going into this were kind of jaded with some of these updates that we've gotten. I know a lot of people out there were expecting the worst and weren't really expecting Netmarble to be able to pull it off and be something to where everybody was really happy. But I haven't seen anywhere near the amount of complaints that we saw with previous updates with this one. And I think that that is just another byproduct of the fact that in general, there's very little you can say in the negative when it comes to this. Of course, there's always going to be nitpicks out there and there's little things here and there that you could point to. But outside of those small things, nothing really glaring sticks out to me. So good on you, Netmarble. If we're going to sit here whenever you guys do something wrong, which seems like a lot, I'm just going to point that out, but I digress. If we can point out all those bad things that you guys do over there, then we should definitely point out, in all fairness, the right things that you do, and you got it right this time around. So congratulations, Netmarble. You did a good job. Now, of course, there are going to be little things in there too that weren't necessarily the greatest. I'm going to talk about those as well in here, just out of fairness. But when it comes to other parts of this update outside of the collaboration itself, of course, we got a Daimo's base update, and I've had a lot of people ask me about this. Now, of course, Netmarble did go ahead and point out that they did make changes to Daimo's base with this update. And I personally have not had a chance to fully finish Daimo's base this week because I haven't had the time. I have been so inundated with the Guilty Gear collab and getting as much content out to you guys as possible this week that I haven't really messed with it that much. I think I'm on tier 34, 35 right now, and so far I've just been soloing with King. I haven't really run into much of any issues. I have noticed definite differences from the way it's been since it began, but at the same time, I haven't had a chance to finish it, so I'm going to reserve my judgment until I have a chance today to finish that out, which I plan on doing. But I have definitely heard a lot of people complaining about how much more difficult it has become, especially once you get to the last 10 tiers. But at the same time, I would point out to people that Netmarble did give us fair warning. This has been in a beta phase, and that pretty much opens the door and reserves the right for them to make changes as they see fit. It's obviously something they're still tinkering with, and I don't think that it is going to be in its final form yet. So if I were you guys, if you have complaints about Daimo's base, or there's issues with Daimo's base, or there's things that you think would make it better, I would just leave a suggestion on the forum, because Netmarble is likely to at least see it. Whether or not they actually implement anything, it's pretty few and far between when it comes to that kind of thing for the track record over there at Netmarble. But at the same time, this is a beta phase. They did ask us for our opinions with these updates on Daimo's base, and they do want our feedback. So if I were you guys, I would just constructively leave feedback for them, and hopefully they might change some of the things that you guys are not enjoying. I know a lot of people out there have complained about the fact that they have nerfed the healing, and there is going to be situations where the bosses feel really cheap because they can just go ahead and automatically use a finisher and nuke your character without much of any issue. So, I know that there are a lot of people out there that have had issues with it and definitely don't like how much more difficult it feels like it is. However, I don't necessarily mind a challenge, but I know a lot of people out there don't necessarily like that aspect of video games. So, that brings up the age-old debate of whether or not video games should be easier or harder, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. I've talked about my feelings on that in the past, and I'm not really going to get into that today because this isn't the place for it. All I'll say is I have heard you guys asking me for my opinion on the new Daimo's base, and I will be doing a video on that if it seems necessary next week. But at the same time, the priority is definitely going to be the showcases and the spotlights for these Guilty Gear collab characters. Now, of course, other things that came with this update that I'm not a big fan of, I've already kind of outlined, so I don't want to sit here and harp on those things and repeat myself. But of course, you guys know that I'm not a huge fan of the fact that they put those extra effects on the 3PG finishers and threw just a bunch of extra cards into the pool for us, because I know that there are going to be a lot of people out there that, despite my best efforts or the best efforts of the community to let them know, hey, don't be chasing after these things, don't waste a bunch of extra rubies just to chase for a potential extra effect or things like that. There's still going to be plenty of people out there that are probably going to fall into that trap, and in general, I think it's just that, it's a trap, and I don't know necessarily that it's really going to be worth it at the end of the day to be spending a bunch of extra rubies to just chase after one effect on a 3PG finisher if you've already managed to pull one and it just happens to not have the specific effect that you might be going for. But in general, I don't think that there's anything here that's absolutely off-putting or anything that is going to just make you rage quit the game. So at the end of the day, Netmarble, Guilty Gear collaboration, good job. You did great with this one, and I would argue that I think a lot of people out there would like to see you try to replicate this going forward with a lot of these future collaborations, at least from the standpoint of the way they handled these summoning tokens and tickets, as well as just the memories for these collab characters in general. Because this time around they were a lot more generous with those things, which feeds into the notion that the overall events and reward structure was a lot better this time around. And while I don't think that this is by any stretch of the imagination going to be a perfect collaboration, I do think it is as close as we've gotten in a long time, and if Netmarble wanted to build off of the way that they did it this time around for the next one, I think that there is a good chance that they could get to a point where with the next collaboration, if it's like this but better, we could be sitting here talking about a collaboration that might be perfect later on. So in general, I think that there are still things they could improve on, and of course you can always improve, but at the end of the day, Netmarble definitely deserves a pat on the back for this one. You know, again, I think that we do technically get a little bit more dogged with them and a little bit more down on them than a lot of different companies out there when it comes to their communities, and for a lot of the right reasons most of the time. But again, whenever they do things correctly or they do things that we like, it's important for us to point out the things that they do right, because they're likely to do those things again if they feel like the community really liked them. Just look at the tower system from the Dead or Alive 6 collaboration, which was a huge, resounding success. And we all let them know that we really liked it. And of course, here we got another tower, and we got more great rewards. So at the end of the day, you guys, the Guilty Gear collaboration update, while not perfect, there are going to be things there that I'm not necessarily as big a fan of, and I know a lot of people out there aren't a big fan of. I do think that this is as close to being a perfect collaboration update as we've gotten in a while, and while not perfect, nothing really is, so I'm not going to hold it to that standard. All I'll say is it is definitely a very, very strong update, and it's one they should build on. But anyway, you guys, those are my opinions. Let me know yours in the comment section down below. I'll see you next week, but until then, like, share, and subscribe. Peace.
Continue.